Hey everybody, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, it's theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I've got regular guest guru Darshan Kulkarni on. Darshan is an attorney. He's a pharmacist. He works with or in the space of clinical trials and pharma law. He's also a pharmacist, so he's got a lot of medical knowledge and he understands how a lot of these drugs work and a lot of the pathways that these drugs have to take. And so he's unique in that he's like this dual threat, triple threat actually, if you consider all your marketing that you do as well.
Teaching.
And you're a speaker, presenter, teacher,
Yeah.
author. So you do all that stuff, but he's got a unique perspective because he understands the law, and then he understands the pathway that these drug companies have to take to get their drugs approved, and he also understands the science behind it all, which is just amazing to
Congratulations.
me. And do not take this as legal advice. Anyone out there, please do not. Or medical advice. That would be even worse than legal advice because you might actually die. Don't do that. Call Darshan if you have a question, right? Do you let
Correct.
people call you, or how do they contact you?
Well, they can always call me if you want, or you can email me, or you can find me on Twitter. You can email me at darshan@conformlaw.com, or you can find me on Twitter, just like you can find Dan, and I'm at FDA Lawyers.
Yeah. And if you want an introduction to Darshan, email me, Dan
Yeah.
at theclinicaltrialsguru.com, and I will press forward. Because in my offices, I am known as the forwarding king. All I do is forward emails, Darshan. That's all I do. Forward, forward, forward. All right.
It's a good job.
Yes. So thank you guys for joining. And it's been a while since we did one of these interviews, and normally I have questions that you viewers and listeners send in at theclinicaltrialsguru.com. But today, because I've done the podcast myself answering these questions, we're just going to talk about a few topics. It'll be a very unstructured interview slash conversation, and it'll be about 20-30 minutes. So just hang on for the ride. We don't know where it will go, but it will be hopefully fun for you guys. It will be fun for us. I know Darshan and I have been talking already for an hour, at least off camera. But anyways, Darshan, what's new, man?
Not much. We've been talking about, as you know, a couple of different things happening with the FDA. We've been talking about some of the issues some of the sites have been facing. One of the big issues, as you and I discussed, is a lot of sites are having funding problems, and that was one of the things we're talking about. And you, Dan, you actually said you've actually done some things in the area of funding. How do you help
Yes.
sites?
Well, Darshan, I was in need of funding just a few years ago, and I was considering. Okay, one of the biggest topics I get from sites is, hey, Dan, we're having problems getting our payments in a timely manner. We know that the drug companies, the sponsors, are not trying to screw us over. They have money. But while we wait for all the red tape and all the processes to happen, it takes 3 to 6 months for us to get paid for a visit that happened like half a year ago. So what do? We have payroll, we have bills to pay, we have rent to pay. I was in that same position. Sometimes I still am. This is cyclical stuff. Some of my clinics have this problem at any given time. So I was in this situation a couple years ago at one of my main clinics, um, and I was considering factoring. And for those of you who don't know, why don't you explain what the factoring is for the people who don't know?
Sure. What factoring really lands up being is you go to a company that basically gives you a loan. And what they're really doing is they're saying, let me see how much money you have and how much money you're expecting. And depending on the loan that you're supposed to, so let's say you're expecting $100,000 from from a sponsor for the study you've done. It's invoiced. That money will be coming in. What you do is you go to one of these factoring companies and they say, you know what, I'll give you $90,000. You can and we're making up numbers here because the numbers can change depending on type of sponsor, depending on the risk that you are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the company will say, I'll give you $90,000. So what you get is you get money immediately. What they get is they get basically a percentage of the amount of money that they're providing. So they're getting money in exchange for lending you money.
Yes.
Now, the big question is, why then should factoring companies exist at all? what is it that they provide from the site's perspective that you couldn't just get from a bank?
Well, they help with cash flow. Banks don't necessarily give loans to help with cash flow because a bank, if you go to a bank when you need money, you're not going to get money, right? Usually. They
Yeah.
usually will give you money when you don't need it. So factoring companies, that's where they operate. That's the space in which they thrive. And so if you have and you can prove account receivables, so you've done X amount of visits, they've been monitored, which by the way in clinical research is very tough to prove because there's every CRO uses a different process. I still haven't figured out how we get paid, and I've been doing this for 10 years. Does it depend on the monitor source verifying the data in the EDC, or does it happen once we trigger something in the IVRS? And if you don't understand what this lingo means, I'm sorry, check the blog. But for those of you who do know, this is for you. I still have yet to figure it out, and it's because there is no standard. Every CRO, every sponsor uses different metrics, and good luck having them tell you how they pay you. Also, because you won't get an answer. So when it comes to clinical trial factoring, there's no specific company that just does factoring for research sites. It doesn't exist. But there are factoring companies, and they'll work with the big Fortune 500s to the small mom and pop, and they want account receivables. They want like an invoice. And in clinical research, we don't usually have invoices. Like I was doing when I first started, I went 3 years without ever sending any invoice to drug company. You don't need to send an invoice. You get paid, but you get paid like 3 to 6 months later. So if these factoring companies want invoices, I mean, it's you're gonna have to make some up. And so I don't know if they'll accept that, and then you might have to show them EDC, and then you may have to show them a screenshot, which is now confidential information. So it's very, very tricky, and there is no standard, but factoring companies do exist. I don't know if I would recommend the sites out there to use it. I stayed away from them personally.
Why did you stay away from them then?
Because they take 10%. And at the end of the day, that's kind of sometimes if you're not operating efficiently, that is your profit, right? And the drug companies have a 10% holdback too. So they may owe you an extra 10% that you're not going to get. So, but the factoring company doesn't care. They're gonna want that whole number. Not they won't wait for 2020 for you to get your 10% back from sponsor. So they're gonna want it now, and that's the way these companies operate. Personally, that's why I never got into factoring. What I did was pick up the phone, call the drug companies, and say, "Hey, I just try to negotiate. Like, okay, send me 10 grand now, or my company might have to shut down, and you're gonna lose all your data." That might work better. It's tougher. It's not fun. It's humiliating, but you have to do it. Or you can do factoring.
So you mentioned besides factoring, you could reach out to drug companies. But the question then is, are there alternative ways of making some money for your company so that you stay in business? What are the other ideas you've seen?
The other ideas are if you have look in your contracts, if you have anything in your budgets at all or in your contracts for advertising, for like lunch and learns, for any pass through costs where usually they can send those invoices to you faster than the regular study visits. So if you have like transportation costs, for example, just just start sending them all your invoices that are pass through costs. Usually you do get those within 30 days. So when I was cash flow poor, I would do that. I would just like round up every single invoice I could possibly get from every study, and all the sponsors were getting hit with invoices, and they would pay them. They wouldn't complain. I mean, it's if it's in the contract, they'll pay it. Most sites wait till the end of the study to send those through, but if you're having issues making payroll or you don't have money in the bank, you need to send those now. You can't wait till the end of the year. If you're considering factoring, you can't wait. Another option is getting credit card and getting cash advances from the credit card. I've done all of this, okay, and still paying some of that debt off now.
Now, here's a question for you, Dan. One of the things you and I spoke about was the idea of crowdsourcing. Have you ever considered crowdsourcing a study site?
No, but this is a fantastic idea, Darshan. I might do it when this call is over. This I've never even thought of this, but I know we wanted to talk about crowdfunding earlier. But as far as crowdfunding a site, no, I haven't, and I would have to figure out how to do that. But it does sound very intriguing, and maybe we should do it.
Worth a conversation offline. But so we spoke a little bit about crowdfunding offline.
Yes.
One of the things we spoke about, obviously the most famous crowdfunding website that I can think of, is Kickstarter. Have
Yep.
you ever done anything with Kickstarter?
I've looked. Like friends of mine have had stuff.
Yeah.
I've never donated anything because I'm a greedy bastard. No, that's not why. But yeah, I've been
What's
interested,
the
and
thing?
I can waste like hours on Kickstarter, just because I'm so interested. See, I look at Kickstarter as like a way for me to get ideas for how to market, promote my brands. But
Uh-huh.
eventually, I'll get on there and participate. I just haven't found any ideas that really um, stuck out yet. But there are some creative things out there.
That's the thing about Kickstarter, though. As you may have noticed, Kickstarter is actually meant for artistic things.
Hmm.
It's actually not geared towards commercial ventures. One of the reasons that you've probably discovered, and we've actually talked offline about, is that the SEC wants. So people who typically crowdfund, they're saying that I want a portion of your company in exchange. So if I give you X amount of money, I want to get X amount of shares in your company. And if you look at Kickstarter, they do not give you X amount of shares in your company.
Right.
And that's because of something called being a qualified investor. Do you remember what a qualified investor is, Dan? You want to tell us
Yeah,
a
I
little
think you have to get approved. You have to have, I believe
certain.
it's 250,000 a year minimum.
I think it's basically like 200, 250,000. You need to look
Yeah,
at the
it's
numbers
something like
again.
that.
They change. But yeah, you basically need to have a certain amount of money. The idea is that if you lose the money, you aren't going to be on the streets at the end of the conversation. So
Right.
you shouldn't be looking at this like a gambling debt where if you don't
Hmm.
pay the money, you will be completely on the street. So the government tries to protect you from that.
Yeah, AngelList actually does that. What AngelList is pretty cool. I'm on there. I haven't invested in anything yet, but you can back syndicates. So syndicates are like these professional VCs, right? And you can back them a minimum of like $1,000 maximum. There's no maximum, I don't think, but for like $1,000, you or I can go on there, back a syndicate, and if they invest in a biotech, because there's biotechs on AngelList, there's diagnostic companies on AngelList, which we talked about AngelList off camera, but I forgot about the biotechs I saw on there. And so you could theoretically invest in a biotech through AngelList, and it's I guess kosher with the SEC. The catch is, and I don't know the legal reason. You probably know this better than me. They only allow 99 backers per syndicate because if they get over 100, they have to change their status to something else, so they
Yeah,
don't
I
do
think
that.
that's what it is. It lands up being a certain, there's a magic number beyond which you basically stop being, you become a fund.
Yeah, so I think it's 99.
Yeah, you're probably right. I'm not an SEC lawyer, so I don't want to claim
Okay.
to do that kind of work.
Yeah.
But one of the things you want to look at, so for example, you and I can open up a company tomorrow,
Mm.
and the idea would be neither one of us needs to be a qualified investor for that to happen. But if we get another 98 people to do that with us, well, at that point, we've gone from being a one and two man shop to basically trying to become IBM. And at that point, you need to have appropriate investors who can participate in that. If you're trying to get money towards that, then you're
Hmm.
basically becoming publicly traded. So
Yes.
the question is when you publicly traded, when you need to have qualified investors, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's called accredited investor or something like that.
Credit, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, forget the terms as you can
So
tell.
that's kind of the difference between Kickstarter, but we were kicking around the idea off camera about, why couldn't a, I guess, clinical trial be funded from Kickstarter, right?
And it goes to the same idea because, for example, Kickstarter has terms of use, and one of the things is you can't actually crowdfund a drug using Kickstarter. They have terms of use that prevent that, which is why a company called MedStarter came around,
Mm.
uh, and they try to get into that space. Now, I don't know if even MedStarter allows you to crowdfund a drug, but they allow you to crowdfund more pharmaceutical medical device type of companies. So that may be something you can look at. However, the question is, I don't think you still get equity in those either. You can only get, like, if you go to Kickstarter, they'll give you two T-shirts. They'll give you, you can come visit and have dinner with the CEO. That
Yeah.
stuff, but they won't give you equity. That actually is going to get changed under what's called the Jobs Act from, I think it was last year or the year before. And what the Jobs Act basically does is it allows more people and who are less qualified or less accredited to participate and get equity for this type of crowdfunding. So one of the
Mm.
ideas that I have been throwing around, and this is the first time I'm telling anyone, so you should keep this in mind. So it's an exclusive for the clinical trials guru as I talk about it. But the idea would be, everyone talks about how expensive drugs are. So what if you get, say, the American Diabetes Association, and you tell diabetics, look, there's a potential drug out there that I want to invest in. It's going to cost 20 million to get into phase 2 clinical trials. It's going to cost 100 million to get into phase 3 clinical trials. If every single one of you gives me $3, anyone who's a diabetic gives me $3,
Mm.
you'll be a part of that company. And when the company becomes successful, I can't just charge $1,000 for that drug because you are my investors. You will just kick me out of my job. On the other hand, if you like what I'm doing and you want the dividends, you will pay a little bit more for that drug because you see the money at the end anyways. So you're both the investor and the patient. Now, I don't know if there are, I'm not an SEC type of guy, but I've always wondered if there's any reason that can't happen. And when I spoke to some of my SEC friends, they said they'd have to get back to me. So it may be a really interesting angle of ways to reduce drug costs. So you just say that if the person who is the investor is also the patient, they have more control over the cost
Hmm.
of the drugs. I don't know
Right.
what do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea?
I think it's a good idea. I read very little about this. I know it's related because when they're doing the clinical trials, they're all based on the whole e-patient movement,
Right.
and everyone's uploading their records. And I know Pfizer, or I can't remember who. Pfizer did the first trial in a box,
Yep.
and there's a few, and it failed, but there's a few coming out through this
Yep.
idea,
Hmm.
and most of these indications, if correct me if I'm wrong, are for like orphan drugs, right? Like rare diseases.
They can often be for orphan drugs and rare disease. It doesn't have to be that way, but it's easiest to try to find these people off of social media, and trying
Yeah.
to make travel and trying to make it more difficult on them is often problematic. So using these virtual models might be really useful. Um, so which is why they're talking about, if you do it with orphan disease states, you're reducing the pressure on these individuals to go travel to. So you were primarily talking about recruitment, but also in terms of just patient maintenance, what they do is they run the trial itself virtually, in that there isn't necessarily a trial site, but
Mm-hmm.
like the nurse will go visit the patient will get the drug, and they
Mm-hmm.
do it from their house to the extent possible. So
Right.
that could be a way to reduce drug costs. As you said, it has been unsuccessful in the past, but as you pointed out, there are studies that are still happening that are using this model.
Yeah, it's
So
amazing what the internet and social media is like. There's like a lot of creative ideas, especially around the healthcare space. Kind of similar to this topic was something I saw on AngelList, which I didn't get involved in because they had 99 backers already. I was late, but I thought it was a good idea, and I can't remember the company name, but they would hire nurse practitioners. So it's kind of like an insurance, but it's a replacement for an insurance. You would pay like $50 or $100 a month, and I don't know if you heard about this.
no,
You would pay 50 or $100 a month, and every month. And whenever something happened to you, like you needed a house, they would make house calls to you, like a nurse practitioner, a real
great,
nurse practitioner could prescribe you meds instead of you going to a doctor's office and waiting in the
great.
waiting room. They would come to you, see you, prescribe you, like write your prescription, then you would go get it filled. And that was like for 50 or $100 a month. And it was like instead of insurance.
Well, that's sort of what the Affordable Care Act is trying to do, anyways, isn't it? What they're saying is you don't need insurance. What you need is so you go to a healthcare system and you tell them the healthcare system basically says we will be your insurer,
Mm.
and those are ACOs, affordable care organizations. And what they theoretically are supposed to do is say we will manage your care, so you don't have to go to an insurance company. If you go to this hospital, you belong to this hospital system, they will take care of all your needs, and theoretically that should drop your costs. I
Yeah.
don't know how successful it will be. There are different models for that. If you do it with a nurse practitioner, what happens if I break my leg? Does that mean they're gonna pick up my X-ray costs? Because that could get really expensive really quickly. Or
Right.
does that mean that they're only gonna cover things like the flu?
Yeah.
Um, and those are the questions you have to ask. Will they accept insurance if I already have it? So let's say my company offers me health insurance and it costs me $30 a month. Can I use that towards a nurse practitioner, or is this changing the whole game? So who knows how that's going to work?
Yeah,
Um,
I found it very interesting how social media and technology is like changing all these things.
Yeah, I mean, going back again to the topic of funding, one of the other angles that I heard was um, they're saying that they want to have uh, Congress actually saying that we will pay you a whole bunch of money in the beginning. So we'll pay for, I'm making up numbers. We'll give you $1 million to come up with this drugs, decide which one you want to go with. But in exchange, we will force you to cap your price in the end if it succeeds. So those
Hmm.
are again other angles. Now, how does that relate to clinical research? If you have a cap on your price at the end, you better believe that they're going to make sure that they will be very stingy with their price when they're negotiating with you. So if that model takes off, and there are no indications that it will, um, there is a concern about that in the future. Because I know several states have actually already put out funds like that or
Hmm.
something like
Hmm.
that.
And did we talk about 23andMe yet?
No, we have not. Do you want to bring that up a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, because that leads into some interesting things. This happened a while ago, but Darshan and I haven't done a podcast in a while. And if you can introduce that topic, and I know someone had a question for you, so while you're introducing that, I can look it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, what 23andMe was it was a company that would take like I think it was a blood sample, and they would give you back your DNA, and
Saliva. You would spit
it was
on
a
a.
saliva,
Yeah, yeah.
saliva, whatever, some form of tissue, and they'd give you back your DNA, and they'd interpret the results for you. They tell you you have, making this up, but a 24% chance of breast cancer, 4% chance of liver cancer. You have whatever diseases in your genes, so there's a 14% this is going to happen. The FDA stopped them, and everyone who was supporting 23andMe was very upset. They're like, why won't you let them do this? And the argument, the FDA really didn't explain that, but this is probably as good a forum as any to explain what really the FDA is saying. The FDA, and I'm really more of a drug guy, I'm more of a medical device guy, and I'm not talking about diagnostics in this specific context, but when the FDA looks at things, they want two things and they don't want two things. When we're talking about drugs, for example, you want things to be safe and efficacious, and you don't want them to be adulterated and misbranded. And any advertising you do should reflect this. So the idea would be if 23andMe went out there and said that you have a 23% chance of liver cancer, well, what are you basing that on? Are, is this study really supporting this evidence, or are you just coming out and making a claim that's not supported by the evidence? So from a safety and efficacy perspective, that becomes problematic. The next thing to look at is, well, do you have the right SOPs in place that say that your data is reproducible? How do I know that? So the FDA wanted to have that discussion. From what I understand, 23andMe had been avoiding that conversation to the extent they could. And when the FDA approached them, they basically said, fine, we're going to have that conversation. And now they're in the middle of talks to figure those things out.
Mm-hmm.
So as it stands, the FDA said you cannot make those claims. It doesn't shut down 23andMe. It just shuts down what claims they can make associated with this product.
Can they still do their test?
They can still do the test because
Ah,
it
okay. I
basically
do want to order one. So it's only 99 bucks.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
I've seen different numbers being thrown around for different things, so I don't know
that's
what that
true. I
lands
gotta
up being.
check it out. But yeah, I do want to try that. I'd be curious to see. And if it turns out to be a one giant scam,
It's $99.
99 bucks, and you'll forever live with the fear that you might get some weird disease.
And that's what it is. Now, what you can do, there were companies a few years ago, I remember, where they'd take your genetic code and they'd make like a poster out of it that you could hang on your wall if that's something you were interested in.
Hmm.
So those are all things you can do if that really interests you.
And
But
yeah,
sort
go
of,
ahead.
if I remember correctly, 23andMe, the CEO, was related to Google, and I don't remember the exact relationship. But I think Google learned from that whole experience, and which is why Google is now looking at, as we spoke about, mobile media, and they're talking about quantified health, and
Yeah.
they want to get into the space of healthcare. And several of my lawyer friends have been hired by Google to get into this whole idea of how do you take healthcare information and provide it to the pharmaceutical world, or at least provide it to patients. And are they considered to be patients at that point? How does HIPAA apply? What kind of controls do you need to have in those places? And if you start making claims, are there issues with the False Claims Act and anti-kickback law? One of the big things to remember is a few months ago, they came up with the first prescription medical application. I don't know if you know that. That was kind of interesting. That a
I
doctor
heard
needs to
about
prescribe
that. Yeah.
this app for you.
Yeah, yeah, I
So
heard about that.
it's going to be kind of interesting. It's a whole new world out there. We don't know what's going to happen yet.
Yeah, everything's being turned on its head. Seems like I found the question for you, Darshan, and I wanted to get into the iPhone thing and the wristband, and if because Apple's meeting with the FDA to discuss a potential medical
Absolutely.
device. At what point does something fun turn into a medical device? I guess we can get into that, but real quick, I wanted to throw in a question from a
Uh-huh.
viewer. Okay, and he asked, um, can I fund? So without giving away his information, let's just say he does not do clinical trials, but he has kind of a retreat where people who live a certain lifestyle go. They follow
Yeah,
like
it's a certain lifestyle that worries me, but go ahead.
I'm trying not to give away
Okay.
too much.
Certain lifestyle going on.
Yeah. So yeah, they follow like a certain lifestyle where they will meet for like a week and kind of live out the lifestyle. It's related to diet. I can say it's kind of like a nutraceutical, but it's
Okay.
like a natural way of living. So there's no
Yeah.
like drugs or like chemical compounds involved. It's all like what you can eat and how your diet is.
Yeah.
So he's asking because he has this retreat, but it only goes on like a couple of times a year. But he has this house where the retreat is kept, where he has to pay for it through a whole year, and he can only monetize it for those like 4 times. So he's saying in between, he's got plenty of time in between. Can he fund his own clinical trial, so that he can like provide marketing for his retreats? So like he'll have doctors and all that. They'll analyze the results of how the people are doing following this particular diet, and he'll use the results as marketing for his retreats to get more people to go. Um, Now, can he do that? Can he fund his own trial? And does he have to report it to the FDA, or what does he have to do here?
Well, it really comes down to just what type of trials and what specifics. Obviously, a lot of things change depending on what you're doing. But I'm assuming no drugs. I'm assuming no unidentified substances.
No, no.
What
It's
you may
all
be looking
like
at
food.
is,
It's all foods.
yeah. So in those situations, you may need to still involve an IRB, for example. You will probably need to involve, as you said, physicians and the like. You'll probably need to, you may need to register on clinicaltrials.gov depending on how it's set up.
Really?
You
Okay.
may need to, because clinicaltrials.gov has very broad expectations of what's expected on there.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to throw that out there just in case. Um, does the FDA necessarily care about food? Not necessarily, but the inspectors may say that we need to have some data supporting this. So again, it goes back to the claims you're making, and then if you're making claims, what type of food are you at that point? So there are again types of foods.
Because
So
it's kind of
again,
like a diet, like and it's not this, but it's kind of like the Atkins diet.
sure.
You know how, or like South Beach diet, like it's one of those things. So they're gonna have like a certain
I'd have to look into it a little bit deeper, to be honest. It's a
okay.
little complicated here
And his
because
follow-up question.
uh-huh.
Oh, go ahead.
No, foods have this because there are types of foods and there are types of diets and there are types of claims. And depending on which variation combination thereof, you may get a different answer.
Mm.
Um, Typically, straight up, FDA doesn't care about clinical trials involving food in the same way that they do about drugs. But you follow a lot of the same procedures and policies associated with them. So, but you aren't like filing INDs if that's what you're asking. You
Right.
aren't filing NDAs, but
Yeah,
you're
he's
really
not gonna be
following a
doing
lot of
that.
the same processes, if you will.
Right. So the IRB is a must. So anytime you involve human experimentation of any sort, IRB is a must.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see psychiatry studies, for example, psychology studies involving IRBs. You'll see, even if it's not a human, you see mouse experiments involving IRBs.
Seriously.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Wow. Okay. So the IRB is a must. Okay, and his follow-up question was, um,
Again, going back, no, none of this is legal advice.
yeah, shame on you if you think this is legal advice. Pay Darshan, man. Give him a call. He's a nice guy.
I promise.
Um,
Sometimes.
yeah, his follow-up question, which you will answer as not legal advice, is can he charge people to join his trial?
Um, Theoretically, yeah. Again, it depends on what you're doing and who you're billing. There are Medicare secondary payer rules and stuff, depending on if he's billing Medicare,
Mm-hmm.
which he may or may not be doing.
Cash money, baby.
Full cash, government not involved. Yeah, you can charge people for doing that kind of stuff.
Really?
There's nothing stopping you.
Okay.
There in clinical trials, those kinds of issues for like drugs and stuff come up. So you'll see situations where medical devices, for example, if you go to these conferences that you and I talk about and you hate more than I do, um, you'll one of the big discussions is in the informed consent form for a lot of medical devices. It says that in certain situations, the company may bill you for the medical device. And that
Mm.
upsets a lot of people, and IRBs insist that that be removed.
Yeah.
That becomes problematic because if the IRB insists that it be removed, it becomes a problem on the side of Medicare. Because Medicare doesn't want to pay for something, basically they end up giving something free, and Medicare insists that they get the best price. So what you'll end up with is a situation in which either everyone gets it free, in which case Medicare shouldn't be paying for anything, or only only these guys get it free, and that becomes problematic from violating Medicare rules. So
Mm-hmm,
that's
mm-hmm.
problematic. But assuming that's not the situation, there's no drug involved, there's no
There's no
Medicare.
drug involved.
Yeah, you might be fine. So
Yeah, and
paying,
everyone would know what type of diet it is. It's a household name, but I just won't give that away.
yeah, that's not
All right, so hopefully that helps. But give Darshan a call. I mean, you've got money. Call him up. All right.
very cool.
Very cool. And I guess that's it, right? Unless you want to talk about the iPhone stuff, or you want to save that for another day.
Let's save that for another talk. There's
Okay.
always good reason to come back to clinicaltrialsguru.com and listen to the next talk because Dan's always interesting.
That's right. Stay tuned, you guys. We don't charge you for this. We're never gonna charge you for this.
Well, let's keep that under wraps.
Yeah, actually, we might, but not on the clinicaltrialsguru.com.
And not today.
And not today, not right now. You're getting it for free. Thank you. Shout out to my clinical trial guru producers. Where are they? It's Sarah Elizabeth Siegler, Resolve Research Solutions, Accurate Clinical Trials, Erdhart Clinical Trials, PTNR, Patrick Stone, Darshan Kulkarni, right here, Biopharm Systems, Zymewire, Mozio, South Coast Clinical Trials, Breakthrough Clinical Trials, St. Paul Medical Research Center in Miami, Florida, Phlebotomy Services, Investigator Research Group, Zymewire, Mozio. God, I sound horrible saying this stuff. It's been a while, but thank you guys to the producers. Go check it out. 99 bucks lifetime membership. I'm only accepting 100 and then that's it. I don't care if you're Pfizer or if you're the FDA and you want to be a producer. I'm not taking. But now I will. So $99 lifetime, right?
Awesome.
All right. Thank you guys, and yeah, thank you, Darshan, and we'll talk next time.
Thank you.